Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to The Great Retention with Camber Parker, sponsored by the YoProKnow. I'm Camber, founder and CEO of the YoProKnow, where we bring you strategies to cultivate a dynamic and multi-generational workforce where all generations thrive. Whether you're looking to enhance cross-generational communication or secure your company's future with dedicated professionals, we've got you covered. Today, I am thrilled to have Tracy Newkirk join us, President and CEO at Intellectual Capital and Human Potential Advisors, joining us here in Greenville, South Carolina. I met Tracy through mutual connections several years ago, and I'm just really excited and honored to say that we now see each other much more than we did back then, and I really consider her a great friend and mentor. Not only does she pour into young professionals through her volunteer work as a Pacesetters program mentor, which shout out to the Pacesetters program, I love that program, but she also spends time with one-on-one mentoring, and I've been lucky enough to be a recipient of that and her time. I'm happy to share that thanks to her guidance and support, we have now worked together with a mutual client and serve on the same board at the Greenville Chamber, which she is the chair-elect. So congratulations. Very excited for your leadership next year. Because of this and so many more amazing qualities, I have asked Tracy to join me today. And boy, do we have an exciting show for this audience. Tracy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm very excited about this conversation, and I know it's going to be a great one. So, Tracy, we're going to get started with what I like to call a lightning round, okay? So just in a couple of sentences or less, try to answer these few questions. So first off, what is something that is not on your resume?
Girl, I'm a party planner. That
doesn't shock me.
Yep. I love entertaining people, creating experiences. That's probably it.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for keeping that a lightning round question answer. Can you share a memorable experience that you've had working with a young professional or young professionals in the past? What did those experiences look like?
There have been many, but I did bring something in here that I wanted to share. I literally got this text a week ago. Okay. This is a memorable experience for me. You ready? This is my text. Can you help me build strategy for my department, navigate upcoming leadership challenges, and help me build a business plan? Like what? Mm-hmm. I mean, you talk about a go-getter. Yeah. That was in a text. And so that is a memorable experience for me, like being the recipient of just this brilliance and this, high achieving and want to do better-ness that's out there in this young professional population.
I love that. And the fact that it was in the form of a text is kind of funny because that's probably something that'll come up again today. But I love that. And I can imagine you have many other stories that are just like that. What is your favorite modern workplace tool?
I would say either Canva, hello Canva, or JotForm. They both make my life easier.
Yeah, love that. And then what is your preferred style of communication at work?
Depends on the timing. If you need an immediate answer, grab me by text. If you can wait a couple of days, send me an email, but please don't call me.
Yeah. Interesting. That is another point that I would like to come back to eventually in our conversation today. But let's get started. Thanks again for that lightning round. It's always really fun how people like to answer those questions. So let's start out today by talking about the young professional generation. Okay, we're talking really Gen Z, but some millennials who are still in that young professional age range that will make up more than 2/3 of the workforce by 2030. Help us set the stage by talking about this from the lens of your client. So what type of impact will this shift in the workforce have on the industries that you serve?
Yeah, I think for all of my clients, my advice is we need to go from a boss to a coach. We've really got to be thinking about, this push versus pull mentality that people have been in. The old way of doing things was corporate makes a decision and they push it out. But I am trying to coach my clients into a pull mentality, which is more coach, which is tell me what you think we need to do. Tell me where you see the challenges. Poke holes in this idea. So it's really boss to coach, push to pull. That's where I think we're going.
I love that. And can you let's back up a second and share just a little bit more about your work experience, right? Because we haven't gotten to that yet. I shared a little bit in the intro, but I think it would be great for the audience to hear from you, the two successful businesses, more recently that you've been spending a lot of time on, but you've had, this is your 5th business right now. And so I would love to just kind of get a better sense of your past and how that really kind of has brought us here today.
Yeah, sure. Well, interestingly, 5 businesses, 3 I wouldn't say were failures, but I wouldn't call them profitable. I mean, they were great, the school of hard knocks, right? So that's kind of where we cut our teeth on entrepreneurship. Business number 4, intellectual capital, I've owned for 21 years with my husband. That's been really great. We've learned a lot about marriage and a lot about building a business and maintaining a business, and then even considering now what it looks like, for this next succession plan.
Yeah.
Business number 5 is is Human Potential Advisors. That was born out of an idea, hey, we're going to staff a great candidate in a bad culture, and then he jumps ship, he or she. And so why not go in and as a value add to our business, create a better culture, a better environment so that candidate can stick. So 10 years ago, we launched Human Potential Advisors.
Yeah, and I've had the pleasure of hearing you speak and coach and train your clients, and I've just been so impressed. So the audience can probably get a feel for why, again, I invited you today. There's a lot of synergy with the work that we're doing with Human Potential and then with YoPro. So thank you for giving us a little bit more guidance there.
Absolutely.
So looking ahead at some of the trends, what are you seeing right now with both your clients and in your Gallup work? And so maybe this is a good way to kind of loop in the work that you do and that you receive from Gallup. What are you seeing the trends across young professionals and emerging leaders right now?
Well, one trend I want to speak about is the trend of interviewing and how that is changing. We are seeing candidates come to the table a lot more prepared and savvy in their interview skills. And you know this when I say this. I mean, how many personality assessments have you taken, by the way?
Honestly, so many. I don't even know the number.
That's my point. I mean, my generation, I didn't come to the workforce having taken personality assessments. Matter of fact, I would say that most of us were pretty unself-aware to where maybe in our 40s when these assessments became pretty popular. So we've got a generation in the workforce, very self-aware. They've taken about 10 personality tests each one, right? They're coming in. They kind of know what they want and what they don't want, which I really admire. But something that we're seeing is like this right fit where they can be prepared in their interview questions and ask the right interview questions. And so as an employer, you've got to be prepared for those answers. You got to know that they're coming. Do you know your strengths? I'm a certified strengths coach. So tell me one or two of your top 5 talents.
Yeah, I was like, man, I should have prepared better, but I do know discipline and achiever and responsibility are 3 of them. And actually includer and developer.
Nice.
Wow, that I have not thought of in a couple of years, but those are my 5.
Wow, way to kill it there, first of all. Okay, so I heard 3 executing and 2 relationship building. So Camber, if you were going to apply for a job, here would be some questions that you could answer. Ask, what project management methodologies or frameworks does your company use and how are they applied in practice? Wow.
Pretty good question.
Pretty good question, right? And basically, they're leading with their executing talents. They're saying, hey, I am a high executor. I'm a high finisher. So I want to know that you have these frameworks in place for a finisher. Here's another one that I love. How does the company foster a culture of accountability and ownership among project team members?
This is pretty cool. I'm enjoying this. Keep going.
Pretty cool, right? So you are a natural finisher. Now you're deciding, are you the right fit for me? Is this company built on finishing? Do you have systems in place that will help me to be a great finisher, right? Okay, you also relationship building skills. Let's look at that. Here's one. What does communication and feedback look like within your workforce? Right there. For a young professional to come in and ask me that, now I better be prepared. Those first 3 businesses, and maybe even business number 4, I might have struggled with some of those questions.
Right.
So as an employer, we have to be prepared for how these young professionals are showing up more self-aware, better prepared in their interview questions, which means that we need to have the right answers to some of these. We need to have systems in place. We need to have feedback loops in place.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I was hoping you were getting to so what if you're an employer? How do you work with that? And so I just love the demonstration here. That was pretty powerful. So thank you for that. And 2, wondering kind of the flip side. Okay, so this is a little bit of a curveball question, which I know you can handle, but we've seen a little bit of the opposite in some of the media in recent months. Over the summer, I remember there were a lot of news stories about young people, Gen Z in particular, were showing up with their parents to interviews. I don't know if you saw anything like that. So it was pretty wild. It was on a couple of major news channels, and something that we were thinking about at YoPro was, okay, like, where is this data coming from? Like, so it's quite opposite, right, of what you're saying, which I believe that there are a lot of people who, this generation is extremely self-aware, right?
Extremely.
Coming into these interviews. Mm-hmm. But what about some of the other narratives out there about younger generations, specifically looking at those who might be coming to interviews unprepared? Maybe they're dressing, not super professionally in the eyes of an employer. So what advice maybe do you have for employers who are maybe thinking some of these things when they are interviewing the next generation of talent?
I think I would ask the question, have you seen this? If you've seen it, then help them prepare. Part of what we do as a staffing company is we prepare our candidates for what they're going into. We tell them where to park. We tell them how to dress. We tell them who they're going to be interviewing with. We tell them about their credentials and their education. So wouldn't that be something that would be beneficial, right? Mm-hmm. For you to say, hey, you have an interview. Here's kind of how we dress in our office. It's really casual. If you want to wear a hoodie, that's no problem. Or most of the people you're going to interview with will have on a suit and tie. You might want to come prepared to mirror that.
Right. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I do find that a lot of experienced professionals in our conversations, they say, well, they should know that. Right. And you know what they say about assumptions.
Yes.
You have to, in this day and age, there's a lot of noise. And we also are seeing a generation that emerged into the workforce post-pandemic. So the norms are very different than what they were even 5 years ago. And so hopefully the audience members that are listening to this can hear from a seasoned professional like you who helps organizations and helps candidates going into these workplaces. It's okay to give them a little bit of framework and guidance going into that interview.
Absolutely. It goes back to pull-push, right?
Yep.
Push is, I expect you to know everything I want. Pull is, let me give you the information so that you can show up better prepared, right? So right there in an interview prep tells you a lot about an organization and how they're prepared and what they've seen, and how you'll do in that. Now, if you're offended by that, that's something else that probably needs to be worked on. But I just feel like interview prep is a way to get around that.
Yeah.
I would also say maybe organizations like you can give some information about, hey, this is what you might want to ask, right? Because so that it's not all on the employer, but it is something that each person shares in the interview process, is that they ask for an interview prep. Hey, how should I prep for this? What should I wear? How early should I be? I know there are biases in interviewing that we all need to be aware of that we have. For instance, Camber, you gave me a thank you note today. Thank you. That was very kind. Some people are really sensitive about thank you notes, right?
Yeah.
They really expect within 24 hours of you interviewing to receive a thank you note.
Mm-hmm.
Ask the question, would a thank you note be appropriate after this interview? Some people go,
it's okay.
Seriously, don't worry about it, right? And others might say, that'd be really smart.
Yeah.
Again, we go back to both of the participants being prepared in the process.
I thank you for all of that. I know it was a curveball question, but I think it was really important given the context and, hearing that both sides have some work to do.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So thank you for that. For most of the listeners on this show, they are business owners or leaders looking for proactive ways to increase the retention and find the best talent across the board. So how do they do that in a post-pandemic workplace? And what have you implemented as a leader that has or has not worked?
Whew, loaded question.
It is a loaded question. We can piece that out.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about what I've seen not work. Paid time off for volunteer. I've not seen it work in my organization or in other organizations that I coach. Paid time off as a volunteer. Like, it's a great concept to think about. It just doesn't work. People don't find something they want to volunteer and then go do it during their workday.
Right.
It just doesn't happen. Yeah. It's a nice concept. What I have seen work is, I would also maybe say book clubs, to be careful about book clubs now.
Okay.
Maybe podcasts. Maybe a podcast club, maybe an article club.
Yep.
Book clubs seem to be not as successful right now,
Okay.
and that's
meaning,
something new.
Meaning book clubs in the
In the
office
work-
setting.
in the work-
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. I don't know if I've seen a ton of those, but that's interesting. Why is that not working?
Think about it. You haven't. People are pushing back.
Okay.
Well, we just have a generation that needs it in quicker bites.
Mm.
So adapt.
Yeah.
Have a 30-minute podcast.
Yep. I love that.
And create a conversation.
Yeah. And I mean, podcasts, literally just this week, we are seeing a lot of news about the podcast frenzy in the political election because they're trying to target younger voters, right? So that's
100%.
right there. I mean, just we don't need to dwell on that, but it is something that, the political candidates for this year's election are picking up notice, and they're like, we need to go there because that is where those kind of bite-size sound bites are coming for this next generation. So kind of interesting there. So that's what's not working. What are you seeing that is working when we talk about attracting and retaining the best talent?
Become emotionally intelligent. I think the best training that you could give your workforce is teaching them how and what to do with their emotions.
How do they do that, Tracy?
Well, emotionally intelligent is emotionally self-aware. So I think the first item is knowing and having the ability to name what you feel, right? Not being so afraid of what you feel or afraid of what your employee might feel. The second is, management. How do you manage your emotions and your employees' emotions? The third is the social awareness, like what is awkward, what's not, what's acceptable socially, those unspoken norms that employees don't know. They're like, oh, I didn't know that wasn't appropriate, right? And then the fourth is relationship management. How do you manage relationships in the workforce as an employer, as a supervisor, as a manager? Really, our managers, we've got to, as business owners, we've got to make sure that they're the most emotionally intelligent people on our staff.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the whole team needs to have this, right? But if you're a team that maybe has not invested in this work initially, then obviously getting your leaders on board first, I would imagine, is the place to start.
Yeah, it is the place to start. And and that's why I started with self-awareness, because many leaders, especially, and let me just say this, maybe older leaders are not comfortable with emotions in the workforce, but we have human beings that are coming to work.
Yep.
Right? Is it okay to mention what just happened?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we just had a hurricane, right? And so if you call an employee back to work and they still have no power, right? You have to have the ability to handle that, to handle the emotions that they might be bringing. Maybe they have somebody in Western North Carolina affected by the flood. They're bringing all that to work. So you're getting a whole person in the workforce. You're getting what happened to them in high school. You're getting what happened to them in college. You're getting what happened to them at their previous job. And you have to understand what to do with all that and how to hold space for it, and also how not to own it. Let's just be really frank. It's not mine to own. It's not yours to own. But we can create space for it, and we can ask good questions to help them move through it.
Right.
The science says in 1.5 hours, your emotions neutralize when you share them. 1.5 hours.
That's fascinating.
It's nothing for us to be scared of.
No, and it's creating a culture that is safe for people to bring their full selves to work.
Absolutely.
Right? Because you spend a lot of time at work and you spend a lot of time with your coworkers and your peers. And so, we don't have to talk about this too much, but I do want to loop back because I think last week what we saw with the destruction in the Carolinas, it was really impactful on the work front. I had several clients who, after the fact, I learned were, expecting people to come into work when they didn't have power, and because the office did. And I, just because of the work that we do, I started thinking, this is interesting. Like, we are seeing the generational dynamic at play, because I knew a lot of young professionals, my friends and peers included, not to mention the people that work for some of these clients, they were like, no, we want to give back to the community this week. We want to go do our Meals on Wheels route. We want to go drop off stuff for the Happy Helicopters. We want to do this, this, and this. Why should we be at work when school's canceled, right? And then we had some senior leaders who said, we still have a job to do nationally, right? A lot of them have national clients. And so I'm curious to know your thoughts on that and maybe expanding on what you shared, because I do think it's pretty fascinating. I mean, this was an unprecedented event in our area in many years. So do you have any comments on that?
Well, I think it goes back. You do want to retain your employees because they will remember how you acted during during a hurricane, right? And I kept saying, we're with you in this. We're with you in this. We don't have power either. Take care of your family. What do you need to do? If you need to work, do you have work that you need to do? There might be a coffee shop nearby. When it's convenient for you, pop on in, get that work done, but take care of your family first. You're talking about, this is the great retention. You want to retain an employee, then you care about them and their family.
Yeah.
You care about their wellness.
Yeah. And it goes back, become emotionally intelligent. Mm-hmm. It's a huge takeaway that
like social awareness, like to understand they can't bring their best selves to work. It's Maslow's hierarchy. Like when you're worried about security and how you're going to eat food and right. Some of the people didn't even have gas grills or camping equipment or, I also watched people who didn't have cash try to purchase food for their families.
Yeah.
And people were so kind. Tropical Grill here in town, Tropical Grill, I think they served 900 people, and some of the people didn't even have cash, right? And they're like, no, here's the leftovers, take them home to your family. That's emotional intelligence.
It is. And seeing the community come together, and again, just because this is a company and brand that talks about this multi-generational workforce, all generations have come together because of this. And 100%. So despite even what I just shared a moment ago, but thank you for sharing that, because I do think it's kind of coming full circle with the very first thing you said on this podcast. So I really appreciate that. Next question, just kind of moving on here because I'm mindful of our time. What are you seeing in the next generation of talent from a recruiting and staffing lens with your work in this space? Are there specific trends that we haven't talked about yet? Because I know we did talk about the interview piece. Is there anything else that you're seeing? And also, I would love to kind of tie in older generations here too, because we're talking about a multi-generational workforce. So emerging leaders are impactful, but if there's anything else that you want to share about experienced talent as well, and maybe some different trends that we're seeing when we're looking for maybe career changers who are switching roles, what thoughts do you have there?
I think two things I want to mention. One is the concept called OOCH, OOCH, which is where you take a 30-day trial for possibly someone who wants to change careers, change companies, and you see, does this fit? Does it fit with you? Do you understand it? Does it fit with us? What does that look like? So we're seeing more test trials happening. This is something else that I want to bring in. My nephew would love to become a cybersecurity expert, right? And we were able to find a gentleman at the state of South Carolina who offered a free class that he taught himself at night to give. And this was all ages. Like my nephew was the youngest one. There were 50-year-olds in the class.
Great.
And he gave them a class for 8 weeks on cybersecurity and what it looked like, and then helped coach them through, all for free. So we're seeing that happen a lot. This investment in helping people to find the right fit or find a different career, or maybe apprenticeships, or maybe the OOCH where you test something out for 30 days. And so really we have to think out of the box. We have to be creative around talent, around that looks like to develop people, and also get to give them the opportunities and the chance.
Yeah, I love that. OOCH.
OOCH. Yep.
Very cool. And really just kind of thinking of how technology holds so much power there, right? This free course that
it was online.
Yeah, he was able to access, and people of all ages can access it and at their own time, depending on their life stage. So I think that's really fascinating. And I enjoy seeing those trends continue. Now, research shows that young professionals today are choosing to work at companies that give them the opportunity to live well, right? So that's with an emphasis on benefits and wellness opportunities. So think mental health resources, which we haven't even really touched on yet today. But of course, mental health awareness stems from social and emotional intelligence, but even like gym stipends or healthy food options at work. So what types of tools do you either offer companies or coach companies through when they need this type of support?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about wellness. Wellness is, several different areas. There's social wellness, right? Are you providing opportunities for your employees to connect? Because sometimes mental health is about, I'm not known. I don't have any friends here, right? So providing employees opportunities socially, time to connect. Emotional wellness, right? Are you investing in emotional intelligence training Financial wellness. We're not really, it's an easy item that you can include for your employees is some type of financial class, right, that they can take for free on their lunch hour, right? Mental wellness, of course, we're seeing better health subscriptions. We're seeing maybe 3 counseling per year that you're giving to each employee, which is really nice. And then the physical, which you mentioned, the gym, and, some healthy eating options. So I guess I would just coach companies to think about all of those and not just one, right? So throwing a gym membership might be great, but maybe your employees need the ability to connect socially, or maybe they need emotional intelligence work on how to handle or not be volatile, or how to handle somebody who is volatile or who uses the silent treatment, right?
Yeah. Having that holistic
more
strategy,
holistic.
essentially, is what you're saying. I like that. Yeah, I mean, it's like with any good formula, with any good strategy, you can't just focus on one component and then expect to have everything be solved.
Well, because that's not what everyone needs.
Right.
And so again, it becomes this pull approach. Let's go back to that to say, hey, let me do a survey and find out of those different wellness aspects, which one do you most relate to? And then let me plan.
Yep. It's knowing your team.
Knowing your team and knowing what they need.
Yeah, I love that. All right. One of my favorite questions for today, Tracy, is as a growing number of young professionals entered the workforce and the Gen X baby boomer generation begins and continues to retire, where do you see the biggest challenge? And knowing you, you're probably going to say the biggest opportunity. So what would you say to that?
I do think it's an opportunity for all of us to understand stages, right? The stages of life that we can all be in. And, part of my role as an advisor is to help people to figure out what stage they're in, but also move to the next stage. And I'm sure you're wondering, what are these stages that you're talking about? Lover, warrior, king, queen, sage. So if you think about that, that affects everybody almost in the workforce. Lover is that young child, right? Sweet, precious hugger. But I don't know about you, but about 13, 14, I became a warrior, right? I was worrying about independence and my freedom, and I wanted to hang out with friends, and I wanted a car, right? And that took me probably into college years, right? And probably even into my 20s where I was warrioring, trying to find the right career and build my kingdom. Well, then it becomes king and queen, right? Building this kingdom, this protecting of the kingdom, this managing of your kingdom, this investing in your kingdom. But at some point, a king and queen's got to move to a sage. And that means sustainability, that means succession planning, that means investing in the young generation, right? So those are the 4 stages. But here's what happens when people want to jump stages and they're not prepared. I met with a young gentleman a couple of months ago for breakfast, and he said, I want to coach businesses. I said, awesome. I love the idea. Fantastic. We need more of you. And I said, how many businesses have you run? None. He was jumping from being a warrior to a sage. Right? But he'd never run a business. Now, I want you to know that young man went out and started a painting company and a landscaping business, right? Good for him. Because business consulting comes after you've had some of those challenges, right? Yeah. Not all theory works, right? And theory and work might work for one company and not for another, or one individual and not another, right? Yeah. Same thing happened. I was working with Leadership Greenville a couple of weeks ago, and there was an older gentleman there, and he's like, I just don't want to let go. I just don't want to let go. I'm just not ready to move on. And I said, well, you're a king and you're not ready to move to a sage yet. And he's like, oh, tell me more about that. And I said, a sage is, investing in a different generation, passing it down, creating those collaborative opportunities. Carlo White is fantastic at this. He created this whole leadership program in his company where he said, hey, I am figuring out who is in my succession plan. And it's not just family. I'm going to see who of you rises to the top. That is a person that's moving from king to sage.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this, and something that you mentioned just about the young man who, was trying to jump stages, essentially. We're seeing that so much with this younger generation, and I often try to explain it to my audiences when I'm speaking or coaching a client, consulting with the client, that in this younger generation's lifetime, right? We are so used to, I mean, that's that instant gratification from social media, from the news cycle, from everything that we have essentially just had at our fingertips for majority. I mean, Gen Z, they are true digital natives. And so this is, not totally because of social media, but when I ask the crowd, I'm like, how many of you have ever seen a young professional come in and want that promotion in 6 months? And I get a lot of chuckles. I get a lot of heads nodding. I feel like that's exactly what you're describing. It's that jumping a couple of stages. Maybe it's because they're ambitious. Maybe that sounds like this young gentleman was very ambitious. But what else would you say to that? Because I mean, how can we prepare for the next generation? Like, is Gen Alpha going to be the same? Are they going to be trying to skip, or is this something that you see across all generations?
I just think it's inherent in all of us, and we're just not aware of the natural stages. It's kind of like that social and emotional awareness. We're not aware of the natural stages. Now, Camber, let me just take you. You're sitting here on a podcast being a sage. But how much time have you spent studying generations?
A long time.
A long time, right? I mean, survey after survey, right? And asking all these pull questions, right, that you've been asking. So it doesn't mean that a sage is after 50 or after 60. So I want to be clear about that.
Yeah.
But there is some time required, right, in order for you to war, to build a kingdom, right, or a queendom, or whatever that's called, and then for you to pour it out into other people.
Yeah. I love that. It makes complete sense. And I think it's really important, and also just aligns with the message that we try to send, which is generational data can only get you so far.
Correct.
It's super important to understand it and have it in your back pocket as a tool. But at the end of the day, you have to know your people, because they're individuals. The people on your teams are not Gen Zers. They're not millennials. They're not Gen Xers, and so on. You have to go straight to the source. And so I think that's exactly what you're saying. But understanding what stage they are in and maybe what they're hanging on to is important. So as you were talking about your own experience, kind of how that worked with your trajectory, I'm thinking through, I feel like I've been a warrior for the last, basically all of my 20s in my initial career. But I see how you could say, there is maybe sometimes I am in different stages based on the stage of the business that I'm in. So I think all of us are so individual and unique in that way that I could have people that are all my same age and we would be in different stages.
100%.
Is what I'm hearing.
I also think it's about what stage you're at in your journey of entrepreneurship.
Right.
If you think about it. I mean, my fifth business is still rather young. And so I still feel like I'm not quite to the queendom, right? I'm still warring. I'm still trying to get business. I'm still trying to create a brand, right? But at the same time, because of my age, I think I'm also like holding it a little looser in that I'm also willing to pour out for free.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think you can be in all three stages at the same time, but you have to also understand the tension that creates.
Yeah.
Right?
Very cool. We could talk a lot about this conversation just because it's really the first time I'm hearing this component. But again, I just love all of the new information that you've brought today. So before we wrap things up, Tracy, I am going to ask in a moment if there's anything else that you feel like we haven't covered today that you really want to talk about. But before I do, anything else just regarding some of the tools that we've touched on today? Like we, of course, talked about assessments, but and I know that you're very pro Gallup StrengthsFinder. So what would you say to the listeners of the show who maybe have yet to kind of dive into what we've talked about today? Where do they start? Is it, working? Is there a way to work with you? Is there a resource online that they should go to? What are the best ways for them to find you, work with you, but also kind of get started in this space?
Absolutely. Well, they can go to my website, humanpotentialadvisors.com. I have a list of offerings. I also have a list of assessments. There are actually, again, this is me being the sage and giving things away for free. There are plenty of assessments out there that are free that you can use to test your own emotional intelligence, say if you're a business owner or a manager, right? I encourage you to maybe I can even give you some to drop in your show notes. That would be helpful.
Perfect.
I would encourage everyone to find out their emotional intelligence score and to see what they need to work on personally, because it all starts with your own work. You can't pour out to anyone else unless you've experienced the work yourself. I would also encourage them to know their strengths, of course, right? I mean, I'm certified in 9 different types of personality assessments, but I still feel like the Strength Finder really helps you aim your talents at your job as far as successfully. And if you can learn to align yourself in a career that you are just naturally talented in, I think you'll be happier, more successful, a better spouse. So
absolutely.
Total wellness, right, that can happen there. So I would encourage those 2 things. Figure out your emotional intelligence score, maybe 3. Contact me if you'd like some emotional intelligence work or help in designing a program. And the third would be know your strengths. Go out there, go to Strength Finders, find out your top 5 talents and leverage and aim those every day.
Yeah, I think those are great. And we will add those resources to the show notes. So thank you for offering that. Now, before we wrap up, is there anything that we did not touch on today, Tracy? We had such a good conversation. And again, I know we could continue with this conversation, but what else do you want to make sure our listeners leave with today?
I think as a leader that there's 2 very important things that we can strive to be: humble and curious. And so I'd probably leave listeners with that, to say, remember that you don't have all the answers, and that's a good thing. And then the second is ask great questions. If you don't know how to ask great questions, use my phrase, which I love, which is tell me more, right? I think there's something you can learn from every person that you come in contact with, but you have to be curious and you have to be humble enough to want to learn it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can attest that you do all of those things often. And again, I'm just so grateful that we have formed this friendship and you've just been such a mentor to me. So I'm honored that you were on the show today.
It's so good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And for listeners, just to recap, what an amazing conversation. We talked about assessments. We talked about being socially aware, emotionally intelligent, leaders making sure that you are aware for this next generation who is pretty self-aware coming into the workplace. So kind of be prepared for that in interviews, and then understand the stages, okay? Thinking of, the lover to warrior to king and queen to sage. A lot of fascinating points in today's conversation. So again, we will make sure all of those resources are available in the show notes. But thank you all again for joining us on the season 5 of The Great Retention with Camber Parker. Before you go, remember this: the generational landscape is shifting, and the workforce as we know it is not the same workplace we knew in a pre-pandemic world. Our mission is to help you save time and money by identifying these shifts and demystifying generational differences through our consulting, strategy, and training. Contact us today at the YoProKnow if you're interested in transforming your multi-generational workforce, and let's drive your business towards long-term sustainability and success. Tracy, thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you.